Hello everyone, welcome back to another After Action Report. It's me, Joshua Joshi Howard. Today we're going to talk about the GT I went to this last weekend called Carnage at the Keep, 40k GT held at Wizards Keep in Kent, Washington. It's pretty easy for me to get to this one. This is the second time I've gone to the GT. They're a little bit on the smaller side. They cap out at 26 players because they're just limited on the space that they have available, but it's always a good time that I go. And typically it's actually like really strong for the number of players who are actually there. Like I've seen a lot of events with a lot more players not have the same kind of like concentration of strong people that go to the same event. I apologize in advance as well. I'm still not feeling super great. I'm kind of hyped up on painkillers right now, so you're going to see things get darker over time, but I'm going to try and leave the ring light off just because like it kind of hurts my eyes. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the list that I was playing for this one. I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about the title of this one because it is firstly a quote from Hogfather, which is one of the Discworld novels by Terry Pratchett, and the other reason why is I think it actually like tells a lot about how I kind of feel about Bridgehead and everything else. So let's go ahead and get into it. "You can't play that," Brain screamed. "It's not good." "It's Bridgehead," said the heart. "It's not meant to be good." "It's a GT," shouted the stomach. "It's a hobby. But what if you lose a game? Then losing the next one will be easier." This is kind of how I felt about it. Before we talk about the actual list and everything that goes into it, I'm just going to say one of the major reasons why I brought Bridgehead to this GT is I'm burnt out on Combined. I've been playing more or less the same army for like 3 years at this point. I was playing Born Soldiers in Arcs of Omen, where I had some decent success. I've been playing Combined Arms or Combined Regiment throughout the Index. I took like a 2 or 3 month break for Bridgehead when that came out, and then I've gone right on back to Combined. I've dabbled in some other detachments through that time, but mostly I've just been playing Combined, and I just needed a little bit of a palate cleanser for this one. I played a couple of practice games before I went to this GT, and like the power of Bridgehead is just clearly less than Combined in a lot of ways. It's harder to play, the reward isn't there, and it does have some matchups that it just loses. So before I go too far, and if you're interested in playing Bridgehead for yourself, well, go ahead, stick around. I'll be talking about some of the things that I did, some of the things my opponents did that made the games easier or harder. But if you're trying to have success in singles, I would not really recommend playing Bridgehead unless you recognize that like, hey, it is going to be a little bit harder. There are going to be some games that I just win because I'm playing something a little weirder. There are going to be some games that I'm going to lose because I just don't have the tools to deal with them. And if you're okay taking that sharper line, then it's all right to play Bridgehead. But if I was really trying to win every single event that I'm going to, I'd probably just be playing Combined the entire time. So let's go ahead and talk about the actual list that I brought to this one. So naturally, it is Bridgehead Strike, included 1 Cadian Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghosts, 1, 2, 3 Militarum Tempestus Command Squads. I had 2 enhancements. The first one is the Bombast-class Vox-array. So this is the one where you can give out the same order to 3 different units. I call him Cool Radio Man. I also had Shroud Projector on another one. This is the one where the unit cannot be overwatched. Cool Radio Man and Friends was Volley Gun, Plasma Gun, Master Vox, so you can have the range for the orders, and Medpack, whereas the Shroud Projector and the one without an enhancement were Volley Gun, Melt-A-Gun, Plasma Gun, Medpack. And then every single one of them had a command rod. In case I wanted to give them extra orders, I could drop Gaunt near them. I could potentially drop the Cool Radio Man in places where he could send out the rapid fire order that I needed, and then they could order themselves +1 save. It gives a little bit more flexibility at the cost of 1 plasma pistol, so it's not much of a downgrade when you're actually looking at it. The last character I had was Ursula Creed. Just really good. It just frees up the CP economy quite a bit for the army, so always like having that. I had 1 20-man of Cadian shock troops with Melta Plasma. This was a couple of different things. We'll talk a little bit more about this at the end of the list. We had 1 20-man of Death Korps of Krieg. They basically every game just went to go hang out on my natural and never really moved from there. 1, 2, 3 units of 10 Tempestus Scions, 2 of them with Melta Plasma, and the one that was attached to Cool Radio Man had Volley Gun Plasma. I had 1 5-man of Rough Riders, 1 10-man of Rough Riders, 1 5-man of Death Riders. This Death Riders could have been a lot of different things. If you wanted it to be like a Catachan squad or a Catachan Jungle Fighters or more 5-man Rough Riders, or you wanted to upgrade your second 5-man Rough Riders into a 10-man Rough Riders, they're all fine. Like they all work. I just wanted to put the Death Riders in because it is a different tool in the toolbox, and it usually doesn't make a big difference which kind of horses they are, but sometimes, like, if you can find those situations where it's really nice to have Death Riders, especially against, like, melee armies, it can become a really big deal. Other big thing, 3 units of Catachan heavy weapon squads, all with mortars. Big thing for this is, we'll talk about what I was targeting with this, but the other big thing about why I was putting them in this list is, even if you don't use the mortars, like let's say you're playing up against knights where the mortars actually just do no damage, they become Catachan. They are still Scout 6 Move 6, and they're still 2 OC. So it's like, so at that point, it's kind of like playing 6 Catachan bodies, like paying too much for them, but then you still have them. So, you know, worst case scenario, like I'm wasting a couple of points on the mortars, but otherwise they can both screen my backfield as well as ping off T3 and T4 bodies. Then I had 2 units of Kasrkin, Multiplasma, tick all the boxes, and then 1 unit of Tempestus Aquilons. Naturally 6-inch deep strike, create some space in your opponent's backfield. So the really big thing that I do want to talk about with the 20 Cadian shock troops is, in some matchups where you are allowed to touch them onto your naturals, you can kind of string this unit out, move them, touch your natural, touch the middle objective, and then you're threatening to sticky 2 objectives in no man's land on turn 1, especially if you go first, which some armies just can't really deal with if they don't have the volume of fire to pick up a lot of your unit in one go. You have a tendril over here, you have a tendril over here, and if they're like aiming at this tendril, or like they shoot at one of the tendrils, right, and you take them off of this tendril, if this is the only thing that they can see, pull them there. You're still going to sticky off on the other side of the board. If they shoot you off of both stickies, darn, now you're still going to be sticking your home. You're still going to have Creed and the Cadian command squad doing most of what the unit needs to anyway, and you will slowly regen. You'll get like 8 guys back over the course of the game, and then that can still go out and touch things at the end. In matchups where that's not possible, it just screens your entire backfield for free, and a lot of the matchups where that's not possible are also matchups where your mortars are not very useful, so your Cadians can touch in sub matchups, and in matchups where that isn't good, you can take your Catachan mortars and then send them forward as just extra little pieces for your opponent to deal with. So one of the idiosyncrasies of the way that they like doing events at Wizard's Keep is you don't know what layout you're going to be playing on. For day 1, you have 2 layouts, and day 2, you have 2 sometimes different, sometimes the same layouts. So for this event, half the tables of day 1 were set up for GW 1, and the other half were set up for GW 6. On day 2, it switched to half of them were on layout 8, and half of them were still on layout 6. It does mean, like, if you're trying to put a lot of prep into the event and like build deployment plans for going first, going second, you do have to do twice as much. So the people who are going to be putting in that time are rewarded for it. However, a lot of people just like aren't willing to put in that time. And it does actually change the way each board, each game is played fairly heavily depending on what layout you end up on. But with that in mind, as we can see, round 1, Mission A, Take and Hold Tipping Point. And I played this one up against Dustin and his Tau. Dustin had a gorgeous Tau army. It looked like a lot of the box art with the yellow and orange that you tend to see with a lot of Tau stuff, and a great guy as well. Dustin was playing Retaliation Cadre. He had Commander Farsight, 1 Cold Star with Fusions, 1 Cold Star with Burst and an Ion Blaster, 1 Enforcer Commander with a Starflyer Ignition System and Missile Pods, 1 unit of 10 Crew Carnivores, 1, 2, 3 Pathfinders. 2 of them had like the Infiltrate, and then 1 of them had like -2 to charge built in, which I didn't know was a war gear option, to be honest. I don't think I've ever seen it taken by anyone. 1, 2 units of Stealth Suits, 1, 2, 3 units of Broadside Battleshoots, all with Railguns, 1 unit of Fire Knives, 1 unit of Star Size, and then 2 units of Sun Forges. Lastly, he filled it out with 2 Riptides. So overall, it's a pretty normal looking Retaliation Cadre list. I think that like most interesting things are choosing the 1 Commander Farsight, which you sometimes see, and then the 3rd Pathfinder unit. I oftentimes see 1, maybe 2. I think 3 is more than I typically see. And then the 3 Broadsides, I think, are probably all the pieces that I'm least used to seeing. But in my experience, in general, Retaliation Cadre versus Bridgehead is very, very volatile. It's the kind of matchup where whoever gets better drops with their drop like shooty units are just going to obliterate the other side really, really easily. And one of the big things about this is because there's been so many points spent by Dustin in anti-tank, which makes sense for a lot of the other meta stuff. 240 points of broadsides, not doing a lot in this matchup. 2 units of Sun Forges, not doing a ton in this matchup either. They just don't have the volume necessary in order to really deal with a lot of the things that Bridgehead is doing, because I just have all body. So there's a lot of like high strength, high quality shots, but not necessarily the volume necessary to kill all the things that I'm presenting. So in this game, I end up winning, and it's not particularly close, and I think there's a couple of things that kind of lead up to that. The first one, So one of the normal play patterns that you end up seeing on this map that Dustin hadn't really identified is this area right in here is really, really powerful for some of the crisis suits because of access to Fire and Fade. Depending on the army that you're playing against, it can be, I call it the DACA unit, but I think it's the burst cannons, or it can be your missiles, depending on like what kind of army you're playing up against. Your opponent, because it's on layout 6, needs a really small unit to be able to hide here. Otherwise, this unit can come out here, kill whatever's on, and then Fire and Fade back into safety. And so it's a really easy way for Tau to make sure that your opponent is scoring basically no primary for the first couple of turns, because you can, it's basically like having indirect fire. Like you have this ton of damage that your opponent can't really get to. And if your opponent doesn't have like a melee threat that is going to come charge these, and especially because we're using the Games Workshop 1.1 inching the wall, like realistically you need to charge even farther in order to get access to this unit. So that was a play pattern for this army that Dustin didn't really understand. He ended up shooting me off of the objective once, but then didn't Fire and Fade the unit in order to allow himself to be able to do it multiple times in a row. But instead, I do want to talk about a couple mistakes that Dustin made that made the game way easier for me overall. Because realistically, this game ended in the bottom of 2, and so I want to talk about how Dustin actually played his turn 2 and some of the big mistakes that were actually made. So I had, at this time, a unit of Rough Riders were hanging out somewhere around here. I had a big unit of Death Corps of Krieg hanging out on this unit, and most of the rest of my army was just kind of staged up, ready to kind of counter pounce. I recognized that because I was going second and we were playing take and hold, my big advantage is going to be coming at the end of the game on this board, where I'm just going to score a 15, and we're probably going to be trading 5s back and forth in terms of primary for what we're going to be doing, because it's so hard for either of us to successfully stand on any of the objectives in No Man's Land. And Dustin, in order to solve these problems, brought out a Riptide. One of them was like here, and the other Riptide ended up like touching this objective around here. He took one unit of crisis suits with the burst cannons over here, and then he had another unit of crisis suits with the missiles hanging out over here. And really crucially, the commander was just slipping onto this terrain piece in the back. Now, after all of the movement that Dustin had done, I was looking at how do I attack his natural a second time. And the big thing that I had was I had a big unit of Rough Riders. My 10-man Rough Riders were still in reserve. And so I bring them out into this firing line in such a way that this missile unit was not able to draw a line of sight to them. Whatever it is that I needed to do or do that, this missile unit could not shoot them. And pretty naturally, Dustin was able to clear out the things that I had standing on primary. This unit of Rough Riders was killed, this unit of Krieg was killed, and we look at a spot where there's an opportunity for Dustin. He has one Fire and Fade, and he's trying to figure out what the best Fire and Fade is for his army. Naturally, this is a pretty good Fire and Fade. It sets up so that no matter what I put on my natural next turn, he's going to be in a position where he can just cycle the burst cannons again and kill me off of that objective every single time. Another reasonable Fire and Fade is this missile unit can go back over here. This is the one with the Starflare Ignition, the one that he can go up and down, and this is the one that gives him some ability to deny my 15 points at the end of the game and try and use the tempo advantage from going first in order to find an advantage. I think either of these are okay, but I definitely think that this one here with the Starflare Ignition unit is his key to actually trying to play the game. However, Dustin picked one that I think lost him the game on the spot. And it was, he chose to take this Riptide and it Fire and Faded somewhere in here. Now, what's the issue with all of this? The major problem is that I can now kill basically all of his volume attacks in his entire army all in one go. Because this Riptide is touching this terrain piece here, I can drop one unit of Scions back over here, kill the Riptide. This unit of Rough Riders here, I don't remember exactly where they were, but the biggest point is that if I give them move, the charge here is going to be 7 inches. And I was going to have CP for a reroll, so 7 rerolling is pretty likely to happen. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if it didn't, but it was a very possible charge. And the Riptide, I could set myself up such that, you know, if I kill the missile unit, I can still charge into the Riptide immediately after. It's going to be an unfailable charge. I also, at this time, had a unit of Death Riders somewhere in here, where this was like, I think it was like a 6-inch charge or something like that, which is like pretty likely to happen, but not guaranteed. But the biggest reasons why this missile unit not going backwards is the death knell for this game is, one, it's his tool in order to make sure I don't get a 15 at the very end. He can use 4 CP in order to unsticky my home and cripple my 20-man Cadians that are hanging out there that are going to score me a bunch of points at the end. But the other thing is there's now a gap back here. There's a really big gap because I have Aquilons and Scions that are able to drop over here, and because he's touching this terrain piece, I can drop Scions and, if not fully kill the unit, then cripple it so that it does not have the ability to really do anything later. And that's basically what happened. I ended up exploiting the fact that there was a lot of space. I had a unit of Aquilons that I was able to fit back here. I was able to fit another unit of Scions with my 6-inch Deep Strike back here. And these Rough Riders didn't have to go for this because I think I killed everything that wasn't the commander. I think I killed like all of the crisis suits. And just like the solo commanders doesn't have the output to like do a whole lot, which meant that the Rough Riders were then able to charge into the Riptide immediately after. They almost killed it. I think they left it on like 2 or 3 wounds. Over here, I made this charge into the Burst Cannon unit, and yeah, they can fall back and shoot, but the fact that I'm controlling where they can go, what they can do, is really brutal. And then these Scions, I end up killing this Riptide. I also was able to take the last unit of Scions came in somewhere in here, and they split-fired, killed a bunch of Pathfinders, contributed fire over here. I don't remember what else they did. But essentially, I came in, shot him off of his home objective, because I think I just mortared some Kroot that were on it, and I killed or tagged all of his volume fire. So basically all he was playing the rest of the game with was like 3 individual broadsides, which I can leave alive for the entire game because they're slow and they don't have the volume. The Burst Cannon unit, which is going to die on my next turn, pretty much guaranteed. It is the only enemy that I have left on the board that I really care about. Then he's got like 2 crippled Sunforge units just running around where wherever they go, I'm going to overwatch them, kill like 1 or 2 of them, and cut the volume of the unit in half. And one of the things that was kind of fun was that Dustin, I basically told him, like, as I was going to my turn, Dustin, I think you made a mistake. I think you really needed to fire and fade this missile unit. And then I showed him why, and this is exactly why it all happened. After that, Dustin took, like, this Burst Cannon unit, came over here, it killed, like, some Kasrkin, and I think this entire Scion brick. But then we had that conversation afterwards where Dustin asked, after he did, like, most of his shooting, do you see a path to victory for him? Did I see a path to victory for the Tau? And I honestly said, not really. Unfortunately, because I have kept him to a 5 and then a 0 on turn 3 for primary, whereas I got a 5 and a 10, not only am I up 10 primary going second, I'm probably going to be getting a 15, whereas he's going to get a 0 or a 5 on turn 5. So realistically, I'm already looking at like a 20 primary advantage at least. And there's quite simply just like no coming back from that. My army is too good at scoring secondaries, and I've killed enough of his ability to play the midboard that I'm never really going to be at risk of not being able to score my cards. So we kind of talked it out from that position. However, Dustin, I know you said you subscribed to the channel. Hello, thank you for the game. It was a lot of fun, and I hope the rest of your games went well. We ended up closing this one out. I ended up winning this one 87-48. And I think the biggest like takeaway here again is if you're interested in like trying to play this kind of thing, when you're playing drop gun like Rek'Had and Bridgehead both kind of are, where you just like drop a unit, you overkill something, and then you can pick some of it back up. Going second, really important, but the biggest thing is still understanding how you can deal with your opponent in ways that they cannot interact with. And I think this up here with the Burst Cannon unit going back and forth between these 2 spots and shooting things off of here was really important. The missile unit probably didn't need to come out in order to deal with these Rough Riders, or could have done so from like back here where they still had line of sight because I was touching, and then the Riptide could kill anything else after that. But just having the general overarching game plan, I think pretty early on would have helped, and I think that's something Dustin is still working on. He actually understands like the rest of the Tau pretty well. Unfortunately for Dustin, I have played against very strong players with this detachment and played very close games with them. So I understood the game plan of both armies a little bit better. So with that, let's go ahead and get into Game 2. Game 2 was played on Mission J, which was Linchpin, Search, and Destroy. I was playing up against Sean, one of the members of the Deep Strike gang, the team that I've been playing a bunch of teams events up here with. Sean hadn't played 40k a whole lot this year. He hadn't played a ton of 10th edition, was my understanding, and so he had one of his friends write him a list, and something fairly straightforward. It was Tyranids Invasion Fleet with 2 Broodlords, these are the Genestealer characters, 1 Death Leaper, 1 Hive Tyrant with the Adaptive Biology, I think this is the one that gives you the Feel No Pain, 1 Neuro Tyrant, 1 unit of 10 Gargoyles, 1 Biovore, 2 units of 10 Genestealers, 1 Maliceptor, 1 Neurolictor, and then 3 Norn Emissaries. Now, this army is really interesting for me to play against because it takes at least 2 Scion units to kill a Norn, and even then, it's only basically a coin flip. So I never really want to take that coin flip into killing a Norn, especially because he's got 2 more of them. It's just way too much of my army to commit to killing way too little of his. At the same time, though, the rest of this army is not that difficult for me to kill. The Gene Stealers, I'm going to ping like 3 or 4 of them off every turn with mortars. The Biovore, I can potentially kill with mortars, or I can trade my Aquilons for it in order to get him off of his home and take some control over there. Neurolictors and the Death Leaper are not that hard for me to kill. The Neurotyrant without the Zone Throat Break is also not super scary. And the Gargoyles, I will just mortar them to death, and I have so many Lasgans, so the rest of his army is not that hard to kill. So the whole thing that I'm looking at when I'm playing this is how do I kill everything but the Norns, and then I just need to hold his primary down enough that I'm going to be able to build an advantage that way. Because one of the important things to recognize is even if all 3 of these Norns are hanging out in the middle objective together, being 45 OC, a Krieg break with Duty and Honor is 60 OC. So I can have the tools necessary to stop him from holding that a couple of times if I really need to. Sean and I played this once again on layout 6. I hit layout 6 2 games in a row, which is generally pretty good for Bridgehead. My biggest fear in this game was if Sean just deployed everything on the line and went first. Because Gene Stealers are so fast, if there's a unit of them like here and a unit of them like here and he goes first, they can pretty realistically charge just about anything that is here, and it creates enough space. And it creates enough space where I'm needing to drop my Scions like back over here and back over here in order to deal with them, which means that I'm not playing the primary game until turn 3 probably. And that's a massive problem for my actual game plan. And Sean, I mean, that's more or less where he put his Gene Stealers. There's like 1 unit here and like 1 unit here, and it's scouted to be something like this. But he also had his Norns just kind of hanging out over here, and he declared this one here in the middle as their favorite objective. And so as soon as that happened, I basically decided I'm going to try and split this board up in as many different directions as possible. One of the things that Sean is missing is he doesn't have like a ton of extra tools. He has like a Spore Mine that he can use to screen things out, but as long as I'm like killing all of these tools off, I can put a lot of pressure, and Norns, while they are very good at holding a point, aren't very good at doing things that are anywhere that are not on their favorite objective. And so if I can make the game, and so if I can just accept that Sean is going to be holding this one, whereas I'm going to be holding this one and putting a lot of pressure over here, I can keep the game relatively close on primary early on, and I should be able to outscore him on secondary. I'm playing up against Sean, once again, a delight of an opponent. He very clearly understood how to play 40k, and because he had spent so long away from the game, he didn't feel like he understood it as well as he wanted to, but having heard from him afterwards, he said he actually felt he understood the game a little bit better, and unfortunately his list was so straightforward that it didn't necessarily have the tools necessary in order to do what he wanted. The other big thing in this game is I went first, and that meant that I see this unit of Gene Stealers here, this unit of Gene Stealers here. I take a unit of Kasrkin, they come out, they contribute fire into this, kill like 3 of them, and then all of my mortars just go and pepper in this, and I kill like 4 of them out of this unit. And the big thing about this is if they actually impact something in my army, if they get into combat, it's still going to explode into a red mist. But by slowly chipping away at these units early on, it means that they are way less exciting. They are way less likely to be able to charge a second thing later. I'm trying to think of like what Sean could have been doing differently in this game, and I think naturally just understanding once he's going second that he still just needs to throw his entire army at me kind of all at once and ask me to deal with it all at the same time is kind of his only real way back into the game. I simply have a way higher unit count, and I can be in way more different places on the game all at the same time, and the unit of Gene Stealers that were here ended up coming to fight a unit of Kasrkin that were over here that had been harassing the Death Leaper or Neurolictor or one of them over here. But when they came over here, by dropping a unit of Scions over in this area, killing this off, suddenly I just collapsed like this entire quarter of the board. Like this entire quarter of the board is not something where he's going to have any control over it again. And because this unit of Gene Stealers that was here comes over and actually fights a unit of Krieg that I had set up on this objective, this unit of Gene Stealers dies on the next turn as well. So suddenly, we are very quickly in a spot where Sean is like running out of tools to play the game other than his Norns. And because I was able to 9-inch drop a unit of Scions back here, they actually hit their charge into the Biovore on turn 2. The Maliceptor that was hanging out up here actually turns around. And so by the time we're going into like turn 3, Sean has like Norn, the Broodlord, like the Gene Stealer character, and then another Norn that's going like this way, and like another Hive Tyrant. So he's basically just playing the game in the middle of the board, and he's got a Maliceptor on his home objective. So he's just like out of units really, really quickly. And I have never lost control of this. I think I put a Tendril out of Cadians to just go touch it, and then it was never taken away from me because the Gargoyles also came over here to try and make sure I didn't hold this objective relatively early on. But this is a general strength of Bridgehead, is it is really good at playing the entire board all at once. It is okay playing a front-to-back style of game if our opponent forces us into it. But if our opponent doesn't force us into a front-to-back style of game plan, we are just going to slowly pick them apart on all sides of the board all at once. And if we can collapse certain areas where suddenly they don't have something that can come charge us on the next turn, we are very quickly going to be in a position where we just control the board. One of the funniest things I think that happened was I had already gotten myself to be in a position where I was really favored in the game. And there is a Norn over here. And at this point, I was like running out of things in his army to kill. So what I tried to do is I 6-inch dropped a Scion unit here, I 9-inch dropped a Scion unit here, and they both tried to shoot the Norn. And I did like 9 damage to it between both Scion units. And I remember remarking to Sean at some point, like, yeah, see, this is the problem with me trying to go after these Norns, is I just can't kill them. And if you can use that to your advantage by just like making me deal with the Norns, you're going to be in a better spot going into your future games. But as it was, this game, I didn't score as much primary as I wanted to because, you know, we were kind of playing all over the board. I held my home and this top left one every single turn. But I did a really good job, once again, at suppressing my opponent's primary. So while I scored 32 primary, I held Sean to only 14 primary. I ended up winning this game 82-52. With 20 points of that differential just coming from primary alone. After that, we got set up for our third game, which was going to be on Mission D, which was Scorched Earth Tipping Point. And for this game, I was playing up against Ken Bush, the same Ken Bush that we did an interview not that long ago where we were talking about his run at the Tacoma Open playing Hammer of the Emperor. And for this event, he was playing Adeptus Sororitas Hallowed Martyrs, and Sisters has been his main army for, I think, a lot longer. He only fairly recently started picking up Guard. And the whole thing that Hallowed Martyrs does is it has the same rule army-wide as our Death Korps of Krieg. If you're below starting, you get +1 to hit. If you're below half strength, you're also +1 to wound. So as units go down in strength, they get stronger and stronger. This army had the Demonifuge. This is the two like weird little people that like they're both like low op and they have like weird numbers of wounds. It's just a really weird low op unit. Junith gets you bonus CP. Morven Vol, we all know what Morven does. 1 Canoness with an enhancement, I don't know what it does. 1 Canoness with a jump pack with another enhancement, I don't know what it does. 1 Hospitaller, which I think is the thing that joins the Sacrosanct, and then 1 Palatine. 1 unit of Battle Sisters that got split into 2. 1 unit of 3 Arcoflagellants. 1 unit of 10 Celestian Sacrosancts. 1 unit of Retributors. 1 unit of Seraphim. 1 unit of Novitiates. 1 unit of 5 Zephyrim. 2 Castigators. 1 unit of 3 Paragons, and then 2 Immolators. We ended up playing this one on layout 1, and for long-time viewers of people who've been watching this channel for a while, I did not play this one on a clock, and that's going to be very relevant in a few minutes. One of the main keys about this mission in general is every time you lose an objective and lose those 5 points of primary, you're almost definitely not going to be getting those points back. So holding onto your home and your natural is really, really important, but holding the middle is only really important in terms of being able to burn objectives. Ken, for his part, put a lot of stuff over in this part of the board. He strung out his Sacrosancts, something like this, in order to make sure that there is no room in my backfield. Junith was hanging here. He was doing a really good job screening out his entire side of the board. He had like a Castigator like here. The Immolator was like here relatively early on, and it came forward. And Ken put a really big emphasis on making sure that he was never going to be losing his own natural in this game. And his big plan for taking out my natural was trying to put like a Castigator here, an Immolator here with I think it's the Novitiates, some unit that had enough attacks with a character that they could plausibly just kill a unit of Death Korps of Krieg all in one go. And that plan collapsed basically on turn 1, where the game very quickly became kind of weird. So in bottom of turn 1, I'm remarking to Ken at some point, hey, I think I'm just going to be on haha, I'm going second on Scorched Earth, I have an advantage, I'm going to win probably by 0 to 5 points. And then we can kind of go about our lives. I don't need to do anything, Ken. It is on you to try and push the advantage. And the game got really weird relatively quickly. I put a unit of Krieg over here, where a couple of them had line of sight on this Immolator. I took a unit of Kasrkin kind of like here, with the idea that I was going to try and get this immolator relatively low, charge it, throw a melt mine into it on my opponent's turn so that the guys inside, or the girls inside rather, cannot charge. They can't do anything after they hop out of the immolator afterwards, and in so doing I can buy myself a lot of time with these Death Korps of Krieg on this objective. Little did I know, my Krieg shot Meltas just did like 5 or 6 damage to it in one Melta shot. And at that point I kind of go, I wonder if the better play is instead we just try and kill this immolator, and then we mortar the girls inside of it such that they're not very effective afterwards. So I go ahead, I throw a grenade with my Kasrkin, that does 5. And then I shoot the Kasrkin into it, and the immolator just dies. And I go, wait a second, this isn't really what I was planning to do at all. A couple of weird dice rolls kill a unit that I wasn't expecting to die, which means that now I can't really charge it, but as the girls get out, and they get out something like this or whatever, I take all of my mortars and I kill everything here but the character. So the game got really weird really quickly. Another really weird interaction happens, and I'll have to ask Ken a little bit more about it, but he had like a character here who had access to a once per game 2-up invul. He had another character here, and one of these had like a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortals. I'm not sure which one, but I drew Area Denial on turn 2. And with the character here and the character here, my plan was to take a unit of Rough Riders here and charge this girl here, kill her, and that's how I'm going to get my Area Denial. But there's some cool tricks that Ken had available to him. And this got really technical the way it ended up playing out, because with the character here, I end up rolling a 12 on my charge, which means I have to base basically everything. And so I had a horse like this, a horse like this, a horse like this, and so I still had 2 more horses, and I wanted to have one horse like this who were touching here, and then I had to decide what I want to do with my last horse. But I took my last horse and went like this. So this horse is touching this horse, and this horse is touching this horse, and with the other character here, I could choose to pile in and potentially kill this character as well. Ken goes, no, I'm going to Heroic Intervention. Takes the Heroic and comes in over like here. I don't remember exactly which horses he touched. And then he says, I'm going to pop 1 CP. All of your horses, this horse, this horse, this horse, and this horse, now need to punch this character. And he's going to pop the 2-up invul. I did not kill the character, and then the one horse that could punch the other one also didn't kill that character, who was on 1 wound, by the way. And then these 2 characters kill all my horses back, so I lose Area Denial. And I think that was one of those plays where I didn't really understand the interactions with this army, which I don't feel really bad about, because 1, I haven't played against this army before, and 2, it was a lot of weird interactions that all played out, and no shade to Ken at all for not explaining all the intricacies here. Ken was a great opponent in general, but it was like one of those like, I was probably just supposed to accept that I wasn't going to kill those characters and draw Area Denial, or maybe put a little bit more firepower into trying to kill the character in the first place. Anyway, a little bit more happens. We get to a spot where Ken no longer has like a real attack on my natural. I don't really ever have a meaningful attack on his natural, except maybe on like bottom of 5, where I can take my bazillion Cadians here and like OC dump on his to try and stop a burn. One of the things that happens is we look over at the time, and we are going into bottom of 3, which is going to be my big drop turn. There's the light. And we realize that there's like 30-ish minutes left, and I still have all 3 units of Scions. I still have my Aquilons. They're all going to have to activate this turn. I'm going to try and kill as much of his army here as possible, and then we can kind of go from there. And Ken looks over at the clock, and he says, I don't know if we're going to be able to play another battle round. I go, I agree. This is probably going to take like 30 of the 35 minutes, at least. And so we have a bit of a discussion. We call over the judge. And basically the agreement that we come to is, 1, had Ken known that we were not playing another battle round, he obviously attempts a burn on this objective. He's got like 3 Sacristants on it, and then the rest of them are like strung out something like this. And I call over the judge and kind of ask like, hey, what do we want to do here? Because if I know that this is the last battle round that we're going to be playing, I'm going to play my turn very differently, because I no longer care about creating a situation where I am still going to be playing future battle rounds. I'm going to go ahead and burn this one, and then all I'm going to do is see what I can do to kill off the Sacristants here, and go from there. Because on his turn, at this point, we hadn't really thought about it. Ken had not declared a burn, but I don't want to be in the position where I'm winning a game because, haha, I won on the clock. I want to because, like, the last turn took too long. And so we had a bit of a discussion there. Naturally, there's no way for it to kind of end without one person feeling bad, because there's no real way for this to end without someone feeling a little bit weird about the result, because as I had drawn my secondaries, the most likely result, if I cannot kill a Sacristance, is I'm going to lose by 1 point. However, this involves him burning an objective that he would have never burned if we had expected to be playing more than 3 battle rounds. And so if it ever gets to the point where he does burn it, and then we look at the next turn, he's in a really weird spot. So, like, that's not a great option. The other possibility is I could potentially just redraw a secondary and draw myself into a spot where even when he does burn, all I have to do, the way that the game is decided, is I just kill him off of that natural. I prevent the burn by putting all of my army into it. I burn my natural. I win by 5. That also feels dumb because that's not how either of us were really expecting the game to go. So we continued the discussion, and one of the things that we said is that we both agreed that if the game just played out and we were to play 5 turns without a clock and weren't worrying about it, I was favored to win. I was probably going to win the game by 0-5. It was probably going to be a 10-10 teams draw. However, it was still close enough that realistically dice could have swung it from one way or the other. It was probably going to be a 10. If anyone was going to be 11, it was probably going to be me, but most likely was going to be a 10, and realistically he could have been on the winning side of that 10 in a singles environment. And neither of us really wanted to be the haha, I gotcha, this is pushing for my own win. We talk fairly often. I'd like to think we're pretty good friends. And so what I offered was, would you accept a draw? We say I redraw a secondary that does get me the 5 points necessary. We both get our burn off, and we end after battle round 3, where it ends up being a 53-53 draw. And my opponent agreed with it. The judge agreed with it, so that's what we end up submitting. So for all my Get Hammer friends who are watching this, I'm sure they're all yelling, Josh, this is why you need to play on a clock more often. It's like, yeah, one of the things that I do notice is when I'm playing up against especially stronger players, this doesn't really happen when I'm playing against players who are way better than me or who I'm way better than. Sometimes we run into clock issues because this was a pretty technical game. There's a lot of really technical charges that we needed to make, a lot of really technical interactions that we were talking about that ended up chewing up a lot more time than either of us realized. So in the future, next time, Ken, we'll play on a clock and it'll be a good time. But with that, we do end up submitting a 53-53 draw. We basically score all of our points. I block some of Ken's secondaries. He blocks my area denial. We end up in a spot where we score the same number of primary, the same number of secondary, and we end up submitting a 53-53. So I end up ending day 1 with 2 wins and 1 draw. I'm undefeated. I haven't lost a game, but now we're in kind of a weird position because there are 2 people who are 3-0. There's me and Ken who are both 2 wins and a draw. So the 2 people who are undefeated will play each other in round 4, and both Ken and I will pair down. We're going to be pairing into people who are in the 2-1 bracket. And then depending on how those games go, Ken and I are still technically in the running to potentially win the whole thing, depending on how rounds 4 and 5 end up shaking out. So I ended up playing up against Andrew and his Eldari, and this is the same Andrew that took Death Guard to the team's event that I went to down in Portland. And Andrew was playing Eldar Warhost. He had Eldrad, Fuegan, Janezar, Lycus, Malgan Ra, 2 units of Corsair Void Weavers, 1 Wave Serpent, 1 unit of 5 Dark Reapers, 1 Falcon, 1 10-man Fire Dragons, 1 5-man Howling Banshees, 2 units of Rangers, 3 units of 5 Swooping Hawks, 3 units of Warp Spiders. One of them has the Power Blade array, the ones that go with Lycus. I kept calling them by the wrong names during the game, and I might do that again during this recap. We ended up playing round 4 on a custom mission, which was Hidden Supplies and Tipping Point. And one of the things that the judge had said immediately was that we were not going to roll off. The 2 objectives were going to be like this. And there's a little bit of spot here where they do overlap with this terrain piece. Now, one of the things about this game that did happen is Andrew's army was mostly unpainted. It wasn't primed. It was a lot of gray. And because of that, I decided not to give Andrew the 10 battle ready points. At most RTTs, I don't really care, but in general at GTs, I do have the expectation a little bit more that my opponent is going to be getting their army painted. But ultimately, the battle ready didn't really have an effect on the game. So one of the major keys about this matchup is the Mortars. The Mortars are really, really powerful going into the Aspect Warriors, and the main thing that I'm going to be looking to do with them whenever I play into Eldar is, on average, you kill about 4 Aspect Warriors with all 3 units of Mortars. But they have like a 20 to 30% chance of just killing all 5 Aspect Warriors in one go. And what I'm going to be looking to do is I want to take out public enemy number 1, which is Lycus and the 5 Warp Spiders that she's attached to. And the big reason for this is if I can remove Lycus's ability to flicker jump, which is not built into Lycus, it's part of the Warp Spiders, she doesn't have the insane range that she would normally have, where she can go 27 inches and then charge. And the second enemy that I really care about is actually removing Jane Czar, because just as we saw in Wesley St. Hines versus Folger Piles, if all of the Howling Banshees die, suddenly Jane Czar doesn't have access to the advance and charge anymore. And so if I can take these units that will blend apart my infantry really effectively and make sure that they are not able to do any of these charges, that they don't have the insane reach that they would normally have, I'll be able to nullify a lot of the threat to my side of the board. And then after that's gone, then I can start mortaring off the individual pieces that are still left in Andrew's army. And in this game, I went first. I put all 3 mortar units into Lycus, killed 4 of the Warp Spiders, and put a wound on the Exarch. And Andrew correctly identified that if he wanted to have any chance at winning this game, he needed to full send relatively quickly. He needed to put so much pressure on my army. He needed to kill as many of my guys as possible so that I didn't have enough tools to necessarily play the midboard after the game. So Lycus, I think Lycus was like here. Lycus came out, did a flicker jump right into here. And Jane Czar, who was also somewhere in this area, went for an advance here and was going to try and make a charge into, I think it was the Death Corps of Krieg that I had aligned like on the back of this objective. And things went from bad to worse really quickly, because when the flicker jump actually happened with Lycus's unit, the Exarch, who was on 1 wound, he rolled a 1 on the flicker jump and the Exarch died. So suddenly, Lycus just stranded in the middle of the board. Also, Jane Czar, this was like, I want to say it was like an 8, might have been a 7, might have been a 9. Andrew goes for it, rolls it, fails, CP re-rolls it, fails again, and so suddenly, Jane Czar and Lycus, public enemies number 1 and 2 in this army for me, are stranded in the middle of the board, and they're just going to get torn to shreds on my next turn. The other major thing is Andrew unfortunately did a pretty poor job of screening his backfield. I was able to drop Aquilons, 1 unit of Scions, and another unit of Scions over here, and this killed a unit of Warp Spiders that were here. And also, I think these were Corsairs. This unit of Scions dropped and killed a unit of Warp Spiders that were here. And I believe it was also like Swooping Hawks that were right in here. Aquilons dropped, and they killed Eldrad off of his home objective. And so at the end of the turn, Andrew was playing with like a Falcon, a Wave Serpent. So this had like Fuegan and friends. This had Maugan Ra and friends. Like 2 Rangers, and that was basically his entire army. And because this is hidden supplies, and because I had put so much pressure on the board, and I even had an opportunity to like rapid ingress horses here on turn 3, we just called it after that. I had killed almost all of Andrew's ability to play the game in the top of 2, and I was going to kill almost all the rest of it in the top of 3. Now, what do I think Andrew could have done differently in this game? 1, I don't think it's possible for Eldar to really play this game slow. If Eldar play this game slow, I'm going to slowly nickel and dime you with the mortars. I'm going to slowly nickel and dime you by dropping Aquilons or Scions and just slowly picking up your units. And I will slowly build up this massive reserve of Scions by like dropping them here and using Creed, who's like stationed here, to pick this unit up. And I don't need to drop them until turn 5. I can just constantly present this massive threat of, hey, I can 6-inch deep strike you anywhere on the board, you're running out of things, and you're going to die. So I do really think like the only way that Andrew can really play this game is if he just deploys like Lycus and Jane Czar and Warp Spiders and like more Warp Spiders here, and legitimately just goes womp on turn 1. Just needs to put as much pressure as possible, kill me as quickly as he can, and especially try and make sure that I have to be dropping Scions like over here. Because if I'm stuck answering Andrew's tools, I'm not able to play the rest of the board. I still don't think it's a very good matchup in general, because I will be able to answer these tools, but he's going to get Lycus if he can kill 2 or 3 units with Lycus and friends, if he can kill another unit with Jane Czar, and suddenly I'm playing the game without Kasrkin, without Krieg, without potentially my mortars because the warp spiders have jumped in and just flamed them all. I can only overwatch one of these things, and then the rest of them are just going to just be in my face for the rest of the game. And that's about the only way I can really think of Andrew really having a primary advantage, and otherwise I just think it's completely miserable trying to play this game from the Eldar side of it. I end up ending this game 100 to 14, but if you wanted to include the battle ready, it would be 100 to 24. One of the funny things to me after this is immediately after the game ended, Andrew goes and puts in like the team's chat, "Mr. Captain, please do not pair me into Bridgehead when we go to the teams event." Which I don't expect there to be any Bridgehead players at the teams event, but if there is, now we know. It's a really bad matchup for Eldar. So the other thing that happened in round 4 was Ken lost his game. So there are only 2 players that hadn't lost any games, me and my round 5 opponent. And whoever won that game was going to win the event. And then if my opponent lost, he was probably still getting second or third. But if I lost, I was going to drop pretty far down the standings simply because I had that draw, and I would be behind anyone who was 4-1. So anyone who got 4-1 would be above me, and I think there was going to be at least 2 people who were 4-1. So I would go from first to probably like 4th or 5th. And lucky for me, the person that I was playing up against was Alex Pena and his Raven Guard Shadowmark Talon. Now, I do want to back up just a little bit here, and one of the reasons why I brought Bridgehead to this event was, one, I'm sick of Combined, but the other major reason was because I saw the people who were going to this event. I saw 2 strong Eldar players and 2 strong Raven Guard Shadowmark Talon players, and I know Eldar is good, and I was pretty sure that the Raven Guard matchup was also going to be good for Bridgehead. And so I'm thinking to myself, if I have a good matchup into 4 out of the 7 other players that I think are good enough to realistically beat me, that's a pretty good odds for actually playing Bridgehead. And day 1, I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't hit any of these players on the matchups that I really wanted. Like Dustin, the Retaliation Cadre, that's fine. It's sharp, but I should be favored. Tyranids is definitely a tougher one if my opponent just goes into me. And the Sisters, I think, is very draw-ish. I think it was mostly going to depend on the cards that we drew and the dice in order to determine who actually won that game. But on day 2, when I hit Eldar and then Raven Guard, I was feeling a lot better about my army choice. So let's go ahead and take a look at Alex's list. A lot of it was very similar to the one that John Lennon took to Crucible. That had Ethan Sean, Captain with Junk Pack with the turn 1 come in from reserves, Cave and Shrike, Lieutenant with Combi Weapon with the Vect enhancement, 1 unit of 5 Intercessors, 1 unit of 5 JPIs, 1 unit of 6 Centurions, and that was the only Centurion unit, 1 unit of 6 Plasma Inceptors, 2 units of 3 Bolter Inceptors, 1 unit of Incursors, 1 Scout Squad, and then 1 10-man Van Vets with Storm Shields, and 1 10-man Van Vets with Infernal Pistols, and lastly a Calidus. And if you haven't played up against Raven Guard before, the big thing about this is it just picks up so many things. You can pick up 1 for free using the Raven Guard strat. And it's free because you have Ethan Sean in the list. You're going to pick up the Calidus. You could pick up the Scout Squad. And then potentially if you use the free pickup, and they're both Phobos, you can pick up 2 units that way. And I think there's one more way to pick up units in this army. But realistically, you can pick up 4 or maybe 5 units all in one turn and redeploy them all at the same time. And the Centurion Devastators, they do a lot of damage. They just have a lot of shots that they're going to be putting out. And the ability to turn 1 rapid ingress a unit of 10 Van Vets with jump packs, and then you can give some of them access to advance and charge. It's just a lot of mobility on the board, and it allows really good players to take a lot of board control. The reason why I think Bridgehead has a great matchup into this is, 1, we have more things. We just have more units on the board, and so when they drop a unit of Inceptors in order to kill a unit of Kasrkin or something, we can then counter drop them with Scions. And we can do this a couple of times. And every time they drop something, we counter drop them and kill them. And even if they counter drop us and kill us, one of the big things is that all of our Scion units have really good Overwatch. Because in Bridgehead you're re-rolling 1s to hit, and you give them the character that gives them sustained, and you give them access to extra attacks coming out from the first ring fire, second ring fire, realistically, you're still putting out 10 shots of plasma. You're going to be hitting 4 of them. And they wound Marines on 2s reroll 1s. So most of the time, you're still going to kill half a squad of Marines in Overwatch. And so we just rapidly can build up this unit count advantage and then win the game from there. Now, this game became really weird because we were playing it on Mission M, which was Purge the Foe and Crucible of Battle. And I do think that while the data sheet and like the detachment matchup that we have is really favored for me, I think this mission is really tough for Bridgehead, just in general, because we have a lot of units. And our units are not that durable. And one of the big things about this matchup that has shifted is normally the mortars, like they'll kill like 2 Marines per turn if you're shooting at 10-man bricks. But on most primary missions, I would really want these mortars to be pushing up the board and taking up a lot of space in order to push his ingresses back. But I can't do that on this mission because it's Purge the Foe, and each of those units is potentially a kill more that I'm giving to my opponent. So they have to stay back, and the mortars are not serving as much of a role as I want them to. So from there, I do legitimately think that because the matchup is good, but the mission is so bad, so much of this ends up coming down to who ends up going second in the matchup. Because if you go second, you know who's going to be killing more every battle round. You can play around that, and also you have easy access to the hold more at the end of the game. So one of the big keys to playing on this board in particular is understanding where Centurions really want to be. And Centurions really want to be like here or like here, because this firing line and these firing lines are more or less where the game is really played. If you give your opponent the ability to like jump into your backfield like here or here, you kind of deserve to lose. This firing line, and like these firing lines, if you're giving these firing lines to your opponent, you're going to lose against Raven Guard. However, we're playing Guard. I'm never going to be giving him access to any of these positions at all. But the positions that I probably have to give him, this one up here and this one down here, are really far. And Centurion Devastators have the 6 las cannons, yes, but more than that, they have the missile launchers, and the missile launchers have a 36-inch range. And 36 gets you to about here. What you'll notice about that is not here. It's actually really hard for the dev sense when they come in from reserve to actually shoot entirely cross-court. And so as long as you're measuring 37 inches or 40 inches away, because they only move 4 inches, you're never going to get shot by these guys. So this is a bad map for the Centurions. So I'm pretty happy going to this game just accepting a relatively low score, because it's singles and I don't need to build up a differential. I just need to win by a couple of points. If I get kill 1 and hold 1, and my opponent gets kill 1 and hold 1, but neither of us are getting kill mores, I'm going to get probably an 8-point primary difference at the end of the game. I'm also really good at scoring secondary cards. So I'm expecting to score at least 35 points of secondary throughout the course of the game, and I'm expecting my opponent to probably be within like 30 to 35, which means I'm looking at probably about a 10-point advantage over the course of the entire game. Again, for longtime viewers, if you watch my final table that I talked about where I played up against Ruben Zhao, where I ended up going first on Purge the Foe, and my opponent also scored a bunch of his secondary on turn 1, I was on the other side of that this time. Alex Pena went first this time and scored no secondary on turn 1, no primary. And I scored 9 points of secondary on turn 1. So I just went into this game with an advantage expected towards the end of the game and also just up 9 points. And one of the big things that made this possible was there's just a lot of room over here. And on turn 2 or 3, Alex just gave me a spot here to drop Scions where I was able to pick up like the intercessors. I had left like an incursor or a scout or something on like 1 wound here, so I killed like 2 units. I killed the combi lieutenant all at once, and so I traded this 2 units, because it's Scions and the Scion command squad, for 3. And whenever you're able to do that in this matchup, it is a huge difference because we already start with more units on the board anyway. And we're trading points back and forth. We're going back. He gets a kill more, I get a kill more. And then we start looking at turn 4. And on turn 4, Alex is seeing the writing on the wall. I'm again just playing like, hey, I'm going second on Purge the Foe. I don't really need to do anything. It is on my opponent to play into me. And Alex says, screw it. We just got to go for 2 9-inch charges. Josh, you're clearly too good to give me any meaningful rapid ingresses. I'm going to drop 1 unit of Van Vets here, 1 unit of Van Vets here, and we're going to try and hit a 9-inch into the Death Corps of Krieg that are something like this, and a Scion unit that is something like this that had just killed a unit of Inceptors off of this terrain piece. One of the really important things you need to know about 9-inch charges is, 1, if you're just going for them with no rerolls, it's about a 30% likelihood that you hit them. If you do have rerolls, it's a little bit worse than 50%. I think it's like 48%, but it's like just a little bit worse than 50% that you get it. So realistically, if we just call it 50%, hitting one of them, you have a 50% chance of hitting this one. And then this one over here, you also have a 50% chance of hitting this one. So let's go ahead and make a fun square. We love squares. So this is, we'll call this one A, and we'll call this one B. So we have charge A and charge B. And this is success. We get a star. And this is bad. We get a cross out sign. And Alex needs both of these to succeed. So he needs to hit the 50% here, and he needs to hit the 50% here. In order to do that, that's about a 25% chance. And if he fails either of these charges, he's cooked, because I'm just going to clean up both units with my Scions immediately afterwards. But the one other thing that we've kind of talked about is I still had a unit of Scions in reserve, and I end up dropping one unit of Scions over here, and as soon as these guys declare their charge, I overwatch them. Now, I'm not within 12, so he does have the benefit of cover, and I lose out on a bunch of my shots that I'm actually shooting. I kill 6 Marines out of this unit. So suddenly, this charge he's trying to make into the Krieg is never killing them anyway. He just does not have the volume of attacks, and I'm still going to be holding this objective no matter what. And then he actually goes for the charges. He rolls B first, and this one is over here. He does not make the charge. He rolls, I think it's a 6 into a 7. But this one, he does make. He does hit this A charge and does get in, but unfortunately, I've already turned this one into a situation where even if this makes it, they're still dead. Because they're simply not going to do the things that they need to do. I'm going to immediately kill them afterwards. And that's basically where the game ends, everyone. I force my opponent to go for 2 9-inch charges on the same turn. He hits one of them after getting overwatched. He doesn't hit the other. And I'm just able to take total control of the board after that because I kill all of his Van's bets. The only thing like Alex really had in the game at this point was he had like his 6 dev cents that are over here that I just never interacted with basically the entire game. Like they killed some Kasrkin, they killed some horses. Oh, they actually came down like over here at the end in order to get like a kill more, and they actually fully killed Creed and all of her friends. So I was impressed. I didn't think that that was likely to happen. But good on Alex for finding that line and just obliterating that unit. Now, what do I think Alex could have done better in this game? To be honest, I think this matchup on data sheets is just really bad. I think the best chance for Alex is he needs to find an opportunity to send both units of Van Vets to connect with chargers on the same turn. And unfortunately, that's basically always going to be requiring either a really long charge because they're on the board and I force them to advance and charge and roll like 15 on 3d6, so you gotta roll at least 3 5-ups, which is possible but not likely. Or rapid ingressing one of them. One of them is going to get a guaranteed charge into something. And then the other one is still going for a 9. And if both of them don't hit at the same time, I can kill them both off pretty easily. He needs to get both the charges to have effect at the same time. The only other thing that I think really comes up in this game is I think the dev sense, he had an opportunity because I had stuck out a tendril of Cadian, something like this. If he had actually just deployed the dev sense on the line here and just shot on turn 1, like that gives him out if he does go first. He saw that line, he debated whether or not he should take it, and he chose not to take it. I think if he had taken that line, the game actually kind of flips. I think he's suddenly in a much better spot to try and win it because I have to, 1, burn my free strat on Creed to go to ground in order to keep some of the unit alive. But also the dev sense are now in a position where even though they're like, you know, I can probably charge him with like Kasrkin or something relatively easily, I'm not going to be killing a lot of them. And the dev sense are okay, like they can still punch their way, like 6 of them can plausibly punch their way out of 5 horses. So it was just another game where I think if my opponent had leaned into the fact that the matchup is bad, let's see if we can just go for something, I think that's probably the best way into it. But Alex was a gem of an opponent. I ended up winning this one 91-81. But if you kind of look back, remember I started this game on turn 1 basically up 9 points. The fact that I only won by 10 meant that Alex played a really close game overall. He actually got 1 kill more on turn 3, and I missed out on 4 points on turn 1 because he had a unit of, I think it was scouts or something that was here. I brought out Kasrkin to try and kill them, and then I mortared them, and they were left on 1 wound. So it was a little bit of unlucky. I could have been up 13 points on turn 1, but overall it still ended up being a really close game. So props to Alex on keeping the game relatively close, even though both of us were kind of saying the score is going to be close, even if the result was never really in question. And so with that, I end up going 4 wins, no losses, and 1 draw, which gives me the best record here at Carnage at the Keep. And Alex Pena, my opponent, ends up getting 2nd, and then Adrian James, who did beat Ken Bush, ended up getting 3rd at the event. I ended up getting 1st. I got a lot of store credit. I'm using it to buy more Elder stuff, so maybe in the near future, Joshi40K will have more Elder content as well. We'll figure it out when we actually get there. But let's go ahead and close out on thoughts with Bridgehead. Should you be playing Bridgehead in your own games? If you think it's fun, as I was playing this, it just does so much less damage than it used to. Losing out on the +1 to wound really hurts on your ability to hurt anything that's more than a Marine, because the +1 to wound didn't really matter into Marine bodies. We're still overkilling them. Our plasma's still hitting on 2s, reroll 1 sustained, wounding on 2s, reroll 1s. But going into anything tougher, like going into combined arms with Dorns, or going into land fortresses, or even going into like demons, you're suddenly in a spot where you don't have like the consistent wounding. You're wounding on 5s, re-rolling 1s, maybe 5s re-rolling, which is basically wounding on 4s, but that's a far cry from 4s re-rolling 1s, or potentially 4s re-rolling. It's like 20 to 30% of the damage into tougher targets is just gone. So it's a lot tougher for us to play a lot of matchups. I brought this one because it looked like fun, and also I thought I had a good matchup into the people that I was expecting to play against. Am I going to be playing Bridgehead again? Probably not. We'll see. It's like one of those things where I do it because I think it's fun and has a specific answer to what's going on in the meta, not because I think it's going to be good at everything. So like, if you want to play in teams, I could see it, but I don't think there's really a reason to play this more than combined, unless you have very specific metas to do it. Anyway, I hope this after action report was useful to you. Thank you to the Wizards Keep and the Deep Strike gang for actually running this. I've got another event coming up in a couple weeks that I'm probably going to be playing Mechanized Assault at, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. For now, though, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.